Hey guys, it's Jen.
Hi, it's Dalton.
And this is episode 3 of Remit Reality. It's this one's an exciting one, partially because one, it's the end of the year. And so we brought on some really awesome guests. But dude, Dalton, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Tomorrow I go on vacation. I'm excited to go see the family. I'm gonna get to go. Oh, my mom's gonna be watching. My mom doesn't know I'm going home yet. That's fine.
God.
She won't know. I just like fucking ruined that, but that's fine. Friend pet's pumping. Everything's good. I'm happy. No, it's good. Life is good. I'm super pumped on the show. And yeah, that's it.
Dude, I just want to say it's like this year has been wild. We had the Ethereum merge, we had SBF trials, we had NFTs being dead according to mainstream media, like Pac-Man entering into the lending space. So it's been jam-packed. And who better to break it down with us than our friend Teng and our friend Ben. Hey guys, welcome to the stage. Teng, Ben, if you want to give a little bit of an introduction and we'll get started.
Yep. Hey guys, thanks for having me here. Very excited to be part of this show and talk about NFTs and stuff. So I'm Teng. I lead our NFT research at Delphi Digital. So basically fully immersed in the space. Very excited about the future. I truly believe that NFTs are going to transform the world. It's going to be a very big part of everything that we do. And I'm here for it.
Let's go.
Let's go, man. My name's Ben. I'm super stoked to chat NFTs with you guys. I feel like we do this privately anyway, so it's fun just to get on a recording and talk shop and talk through the year. I guess the one line thing from me is I'm primarily an angel investor in crypto, mostly companies that work with NFTs, kind of this crypto and culture intersection. Have been into NFT Finance since 2020. So like, let's go. It's almost 4 years at this point.
Ben, you're an OG.
Yeah, excited.
Absolute OG. Okay, before we dig in, the first question I want to ask you guys, what is the biggest win you've had this year? And then what's the biggest L you've seen or experienced?
I don't think I could say my biggest L. biggest W would be Solana. Like I was saying before the show, I was just kind of every single paycheck over the past year, I was allocating as much as I could over there, just waiting for that blow up to happen, and it happened. So I'm definitely pumped on that. Biggest L, Moonbirds. Sorry guys, but yeah, Moonbirds is definitely my biggest L. So moving on.
Yeah, I think I actually am pretty similar to Dalton. I think my biggest win was really being in Solana, like just both the Solana token as well as the Solana NFT ecosystem. We've actually been covering Solana NFTs since the later part of last year, and quite well acquainted with the Tensor team, and just seeing what they were doing in the space, how they were eating away at Magic Eden's market share every single day, made me bullish on what was going on. Yeah, so I think that was definitely the biggest win of the year. Things still will continue to do well. I think the biggest L, I don't know, man. I think unfortunately it probably was the Azuki stuff. I still use an Azuki as my PFP. It's still part of my identity. No intention to change that, but yeah, it's unfortunate that that it's fallen quite a bit this year, 50-60%. So I'm still holding it.
Yeah, you and me both. Bag holding Azuki. That's my biggest L too. Ben, what's your biggest win?
Yeah, I feel like excuse me. Solana and that whole ecosystem is probably also my biggest win. I had a couple, like Memeland did well, Unibot did well. The maybe the only original one that I did well on was Prime. So I was into Parallel. I've been into that whole scene for a lot of the last 2 years. So I had a good entry. And then it's always fun to look good when the price goes up and it's like, see, I told you. So yeah, no, I feel like those are some of the wins for sure. Biggest loss, mostly just having conviction in certain things and not acting on them. So I was in some shitcoin. I forget what it was. I think it was actually DMT on Arbitrum. And instead of being in that, or instead of being in Prime, in way bigger size, I was in that, and it got wrecked. And then you sit there and think, wow, I could have just, bought the good coins and done nothing and had a holiday and been up so much bigger. So it's always humbling, right? I feel like no matter how long you're around, you just, have to keep it tight.
I told you season is my favorite season. Like
For real.
I'm not petty. I'm petty. No, I'm definitely petty. But like I told you season is definitely my favorite. I'm just like, that's right, bro. I fucking told you. And it just feels so good. I don't know. Jen, biggest W?
My little pudgy penguins, my biggest win. And then biggest L is actually like definitely a combination of what Teng and Ben said. Like Azuki Elementals wrecked my portfolio because I sold out of everything. Like I full on FOMO'd into that mint. I was like, I'm gonna mint this elemental beans. Like I was ready. I was refreshing the page. So that was like fun for the 30 seconds that it was. And then it was just like a reality shock afterwards. And then to Ben's point, I think like, you know, I had met with a few Soul founders and I thought what they were doing was really cool. I thought they were really smart guys. And I kept being like, oh, I need to look into Soul. I need to look into Soul. And like kept pushing it off. And then Dalton, I met you and you're like, Solana, bro. And I was like, I need to look into Soul. That's right. And then by the time I looked into Soul, it is like soaring. And it's like, that's on me though. That was a huge learning lesson of like, if you keep pushing off the research, you're never going to make the plays.
Mm-hmm. Yo, but that's honestly the space, right? And like this is my third cycle, like we're going into my third cycle, and I think those are lessons that you have to learn. And so for anybody listening that hasn't been around and maybe NFTs were their introduction to the space, like getting wrecked is your tuition, and it sucks, dude. Like it's the name of the game. And how many times have I made six figures off of 3 or 4 figures and then lost six figures? Like it's just what happens, dude. And it's an unfortunate part of the game, but we're lucky to be here. And now we get to look at the past year where we all lost money.
Yes, we do. Speaking of that, you guys can see here, you know, so this was a dune that I found that basically just covers trading volume on ETH over 2023. And Dalton, I know we're going to cover Solana a little bit as well. But I was just looking at this and it's like, what, 12 billion in volume traded. But like you could just see here, like throughout the year, we just see this like steady decline in volume. Like any thoughts on this? Like Teng, I'm sure you look at this every single day. And Ben, as someone who's trading in the space, you probably felt this, especially when it really started to dry up.
Yeah, it was like apocalyptic for a lot of the year, honestly. No real liquidity, everything just kind of down or sideways. People were trying to figure out when it would turn, right? Like, is it the summer? Is that the bottom? Is it Labor Day? Is that the bottom? But the uptick at the end of the year is a nice validation of like, okay, I think we're kind of turning the corner here. It's just, you know, most people wouldn't have predicted that out front. And so I think it took a lot of people by surprise just to see, okay, stuff's going up. And the way these things trade too is because there's such little liquidity, any surge of excitement makes the price go up a lot, and it's super reflexive, right? That draws everyone in. And it's like, wow, a pudgy penguin is up this much already. How is this possible? But there's just because there's not that many listed ultimately, right? And then, you know, stuff just spirals from there.
Something that oh, go ahead, Teng.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to add to like what Ben said. I think one of the things that led to like this year to be pretty much like sideways to down only is that I think that we just haven't seen like any new people like enter the space. Like it's the same people who's trading NFTs, like rotating between different projects and stuff. But even up to the day, I think like there is still very limited like new interest in NFTs yet. I think that would change. But yeah, I think that's one of the big factors, I think.
Something that Sam says all the time, Sam NFT Stats, he talks about NFTs being a momentum-based asset, right? And that's something that we saw in the space, that as they go up hard, like day over day. Like those things can pump like nothing we've ever really seen. But the same is to be said for going down, right? Like it goes down hard. One of the questions that I have here is about the post-Blur era. So Blur comes in earlier this year. They introduced what we thought was going to be like limit orders, right? Like these bid offers that people are going to like buy NFTs at this price, and they're going to wait for price to drop, and then they're going to get their order filled, and then it's going to pump again. Like that's kind of how we thought about these bids in the beginning. And people were like, the market's so much more efficient. Yeah, that didn't work, right? And then they had to incentivize people with points and Blur bid points and all of that kind of stuff. And we really haven't seen any projects pump post Blur except for Captains and Potatoes and Pudgy Penguins. And the reason Captains and Potatoes pump are kind of like unaffected by this is because they're royalty enabled. So people are paying royalties on that. Therefore, Blur bid farmers don't really want to mess with them. And then the Pudgy side, they are really the only outlier here. So we've seen this recent pump. Pudgies have gone from what, like they were at 3 ETH to like 12 ETH in the span of a month and a half, 2 months. Might be my time frame might be off a little bit, but do you think that this pump kind of stays, and how, like they have maintained a double-digit floor to this point, but do you think that they're going to kind of get like this bloodbathy farmers kind of playing hot potato with these unwanted NFTs, or are Pudgies different?
I think like two things come to mind. Like one is that like NFTs are very much an attention game. It's about like which project can generate the greatest mind share among people. And definitely I think Pudgies have been doing that very well, right? With their recent like Walmart announcements, their toys like going, very everywhere. And, on Instagram, they're getting a lot of like attention, like even like my girlfriend, who isn't a crypto person at all, like she follows the Pudgy Penguins like Instagram page and she loves them so much. So yeah, it's amazing, right? So I had to buy like one of those like plushies for her. What
a good boyfriend! What a
Let's
good
go,
boyfriend.
man.
The plushies are cute.
They're really cute. Like though, I must say they are pretty cute. Like, I have like one of them like right here, so it's pretty nice. Yeah. So I think there's one thing that's the attention game. Like, can you continue to sustain attention? And if the Pudgies can continue to do that in 2024 with new announcements, partnerships, then I think they'll continue to do well. Yeah, I kind of forgot my second point, so I lost a little bit of my train of thought there. But yeah.
I can pick up there. I feel like it's interesting when you look at the NFT. I'm just on Blur scrolling around trying to catch up a bit about what's kind of been going on over the last little while. When you look at what's done well, all of the projects that stick out, like the ones that you've mentioned, Memeland and Pudgies, but also stuff like Parallel Avatars or Pixelmon has done well. They've kind of been able to shoot their own shot and create attention around themselves in a way that's independent of just NFTs, right? Pudgies, like to Teng's point, like the memes have proliferated very effectively to normal people. Memeland has 9gag, and you're just gathering so much attention from that you're able to, they dropped a token. There's kind of a reason why those things are pumping. Parallel has had a big run. So yeah, when I look at kind of what the outliers are, it's mostly because, or these things have performed well, mostly because they're able to collect attention from elsewhere, not from the NFT little bit of capital that's sloshing around. Because for the most part, stuff's still kind of flat. Of course, we're up a little bit off the bottom, but what's a clone? A clone is 1.39 ETH. It's not like it's up a huge amount or something, right? That's still pretty close to the floor. And I think most stuff is there. So yeah, I think it's just what projects have been able to collect attention from elsewhere.
Yeah, the token drop is something that Pudgies do have going for them, for sure.
I mean, they haven't even announced a token drop yet.
But like the rumors are like permeating.
But there it is. Like they have our attention. And I do just have to say, like, I feel like this pump for Pudgy was not out of nowhere. Like even after the Walmart announcement, I think the floor at the time was only like 6 or 7 ETH or sitting around there. It hadn't even hit double digits. And it's just like, I think Pudgy, in my opinion, Pudgy and Pixelmon, I feel like are two of the collections that I've just seen like steadily rise over the year. And it wasn't necessarily one big event or one big announcement or one massive catalyst that like really pushed it over. So I don't see it going anywhere. I think Pudgies might be flipping some of people's favorite blue chips in 2024. It's already flipped quite a few.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. I think that they, like you said, they've maintained attention. I wouldn't be surprised if farmers play hot potato. And I also think something else that is going for Pudgies is like they only have 55, right? And that's the total supply. I think they're not 10K.
I think Pudgies are 888.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. But
yeah,
they're under 10K. So the price bump there's a little bit there.
Yeah, I thought they were 55, but that's besides the point. Like they have done a very good job of maintaining attention. Now, little Pudgies having like 20,000, that's a whole nother ball game. But like, I think the permeation of token plus the fact that they were at like 0.4 ETH for months and months, and then Luca came in, and they've done such a good job. And going to Teng's point, like talking about like the little GIFs that they produce and things like that. I think they've done like a billion impressions or something like that, or a billion
across like Giphy, TikTok,
Uh-huh.
Instagram. Yeah, massive.
That's huge, and that's something that like nobody has really taken a stab at that. And like we've talked about this before, how there's like this IP, like people talk about NFT IP all the time, and I'm like, dude, who gives a fuck? Like nobody wants to rock that anyways. You know what I'm saying? Like that, it doesn't make sense to me. But with Pudgies, it does, and they're kind of an outlier in that, because like if they get into mainstream culture, they are going to be like something that people look at and they're going to be like, damn, you have like an actual Pudgy penguin. You get me?
Totally. Well, so speaking of that, I feel like every major collection kind of had its moment this year. Like at the beginning of the year, there was Yuga with Dookie Dash. Can you guys believe that that was earlier this year? It feels like a decade ago, but like, no, that was just a couple of months ago when we zoom out. Obviously Azuki with Elementals, D-God Season 3 plus I guess D-God Season 3 Part 2, whatever we want to call their clarify period. Like we said, Pudgy with Walmart. Is there anything that any one of the major collections did that really stood out to you guys? Or that you were kind of like, oh, that's interesting. This is something that people are either, you know, mid-curving and should be paying attention to?
I'll throw one more in there. On-chain monkeys doing the bridge to ordinals, I think was
That's
pretty
right.
pretty badass. Like I mid-curved the fuck out of BRC20s, ordinals, everything like that. I was tweeting about BRC20s and they ripped. And On-chain monkeys was one of those people that said like, no, we're gonna push this. So like, good on them. Like they've definitely proved to their community that they know what they're doing. Yeah, I think that would probably be the big one for me.
Yeah, I think one that also came to mind like this year was the My Ladies. Like honestly, it's been one community I've never really understood, but they had a lot of stuff just going on. Like I think like one of the founders was like suing the other co-founders, you know, about like misappropriating some of the funds, and then later it turned out like this was just a marketing campaign and they actually were just doing it to generate attention. So it's very weird. It's a little bit I don't understand it, but a lot of people I know are like really into it. Like they love their My Ladies, and some of them are not even like NFT people. They're like DeFi folks but they just love their My Lady PFP. So
is it the culture? Because I don't get what's going on over there either. Like,
I don't get it either, but I love it, dude. I'm so here for it. Like I'll talk to DeFi people. I'm like they'll rock a Milady PFP, and I'm just like, bro, you don't even like PFPs. You don't like NFTs. They're like, he's like, yeah, this is stupid, but fucking Miladies are badass. I'm like, wow, okay. I want one because like everybody else has one, so fuck it.
Okay, I'll jump in. I feel like initially anyway, it was like the counterculture PFP. Like this is the anti-NFT NFT club situation. And eventually it becomes a bit normalized where the average DeFi person might be more drawn to that, whatever. They're very financialized. Like they made a pretty good BD effort to become the first NFT that, you know, maybe not the first, but an early community in a lot of the AMMs, like for NFT perps, like you could trade Miladies pretty effectively. They just made inroads into all these sort of initially more niche communities, and they've done super well, but it's also like, yeah, the chaos it's divisive, and that's, I think, a good thing because it gets people to care or not care in a really intense way, and that's how you build a brand, right? So they've done pretty well. I feel like I was gonna say two other different examples. The pandas, Kampai Pandas, Icebags has done super well with that over there.
That's another one I don't understand. Like,
yeah, this is worth looking at.
I don't get it.
Okay,
what's
so
the alpha then?
I had a chance to interview Icebags with Fungible on our kind of weekly Twitter Spaces series, and it's just interesting. Like he essentially acquired this project, these funny little pandas, and he's building a media company around like fighting and sort of all degeneracy related things. There's going to be like a gambling piece. They have an Overdogs podcast, which is like super high quality media. They're just really taking the one business model that makes sense around PFPs, which is like we're a media company, and running it professionally, right? Like they actually can execute. They have past business experience, whatever. Pudgies obviously are doing their own thing. So I guess there are more than one way of playing an NFT project, but it's always made the most sense to me to explore like what could you do with NFTs as a layer in a media company. And so I think pandas will be, I mean, we're already one to watch. They're up quite big, but I think over the next year, I mean, we'll save some time for predictions later, but I think they will do well.
Oh boy. All right. More research after the podcast that's going to be coming.
I literally just saw a tweet that was like, what the fuck is a Kumpai panda? And I was like,
Exactly,
dude,
dude. This is the alpha, man.
Dude, they're on Soul too, no?
They're on all these chains, I think. Yeah.
Yeah,
He
'cause,
minted
like,
it. They minted it across chains. It was interesting. I mean, part of why these projects do well is people just like see them on the timeline or see them in the charts and ignore them for a long period of time until price goes up significantly.
Yeah.
I mean, same thing with even like OPEPINs is another one that comes to mind.
that-
So many people were like, what the hell is an OPEPIN? This doesn't make any sense. Like Jack just changed the metadata. I don't understand. And yet actually like that turned into one of my favorite projects this year. Effectively,
Yeah.
you're building like a public art museum. And I don't know, that was very cool and still is very cool.
Definitely agree with OPEPINs. That's one that we left out. Like OPEPINs, Amanda, aka Stevie, and I covered OPEPINs quite a bit in the early going. And like when they started changing metadatas, that was the meta at that point. Like people started copying things, and like Batstu was one of the artists that kind of put stuff out. And then there was another one, was it VVD? Vincent Van Gogh put one out. And then Jack was just changing the metadata like every couple days, and then every time he changed it, the fucking price went. It's like, and then it would go down, and then he would change the metadata, poof, and people were like super excited. And then all of a sudden, they put the white paper out, and it was like, yeah, we're gonna kind of be like a time series or a time lapse of NFT culture, and we're gonna use these geometric shapes to kind of represent the collection. So like you'll know that there are OPEPINs, but we'll be able to timestamp the culture between like over the time of everything going on. And I think yesterday they did drop 27 out of like 180 or 200. And it was like the fourth highest floor price out of all of them. So they're still maintaining. I think something interesting that's going to happen with them, I think there's 180 or 200 drops. I don't quite remember. But as they get to the end, because there's a mechanic where you have to have over 20x the amount. So there's 80 per drop. So you have to have 20x the amount of demand to say that the art is good enough, that people actually want to rock that. And that's like the approval mechanism. And then once they get approved, then whatever happens. But I think as they get to like number 100 and things like that, the mechanics is going to start to change, because people are going to want the last OPEPIN edition, right? Like people wanted the first OPEPIN edition. People are going to want like the last couple. So we'll see kind of what happens. But Jack definitely did knock that one out of the park.
Kind of changed, I feel like, the art scene for NFTs. Like I haven't really been big into art. Like I started looking at Chromie Squiggles as like trying to understand like, why are people taking out so many loan against Chromie Squiggles? Like what is it? And then it was like, oh, okay, provenance. Like you can't really talk about generative art with NFTs without referencing Chromie Squiggles. And I was like, okay, I can see like the value that's going to come to that over time. But I feel like Jack made it like de-Jenny. Like he just tapped like every single ape that I knew was like fucking around with OPEPINs. And like I was kind of just was very overwhelmed and didn't understand it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then, you know, checks came out later and it was like, what the fuck? Like it's just taking over the timeline.
Checks blew up. OPEPINs, like that whole ecosystem is cool. Something interesting that I think will happen is Visualized Value has, I think 27, 28 collections over the span of time. Like I minted a Jack Butcher in 2021. And like they aren't all on one platform yet, and they're all sporadic. They're on like mirror editions on OpenSea, and like there's no even like search function. Like you literally have to type in the exact like collection name to even let it pop up. So it'll be interesting to see if they can kind of wrap some of these things and put them into like a singular platform so that Jack Butcher maxis can kind of see what's going on. But we'll see. Pivoting a little bit, Teng, you brought up Solana earlier. Well, we both did. And I think that we're safe to say that we're probably two of the biggest Solana maxis on this show right now. Solana NFT volume is starting to take on ETH NFT volume, especially with kind of Blur and all of that kind of stuff. Like there is incentivized volume, but if incentivized volume did not exist, Solana would definitely flip ETH NFT volume at this point. How do you feel about this? And as for blue chips, I've seen this a couple times where people have said like Mad Lads are going to flip apes and we're going to start to see some like ETH 2021 NFT price action over on Solana. How do you feel about that? Where are the standouts here? And kind of how are you playing this game at this point?
Yeah, I think Solana is really interesting. If you look at what's happening today, like I think like in terms of transaction volumes, like ETH probably takes up like 66%, Solana takes up maybe 10 to 12% of like NFT transaction volumes, throughout most of the year, until the last couple of weeks. And if you look at the market cap of like NFTs on ETH versus NFTs on Solana is like probably just about 5% of that on ETH. So, today the situation is that most of the high value NFTs, the CryptoPunks, Fidenzas are all still on ETH. But I think what's going to happen in the next year or so is that we're going to start to see this gap narrow a lot. And the reason is because I think it's starting to make less and less sense for people to like launch like new collections on ETH. So, gas prices are high. It's going to be really expensive to like mint, especially if we think that ETH prices are going to go up. And then on Solana, basically you can mint NFTs like very cheap. They even have these like compressed NFTs where you can mint like 1 million of these NFTs at like just like, I think you can mint 1 million of these NFTs for like just $100 or $200 or so, right? Which is pretty amazing. And that unlocks a lot of like very new use cases. So my take on like Solana NFTs overall is that one is that most of the Solana NFT projects, to be honest, they aren't particularly innovative. Most of them are like PFP communities, and basically more of like just vibes, and having fun. A few have started to rise, like the Mad Lads, Tensorians, and I think these two are interesting because they are tied to something beyond just a PFP community. Like the Mad Lads, the founders are building they're building an exchange that they hope to be like the next version of FTX with like verifiable proof of reserve. So I think that's what's driving a lot of interest, that people think that maybe they'll get a token airdrop or they'll get some incentive to be part of this platform as well. Same thing for Tensorians, that people are thinking that these would also get them an airdrop through Tensor, which is essentially the blur of Solana. So I think, to me, there are going to be a few of these standout projects that will continue to do well. Majority may probably still stay as very niche communities, but what I'm really looking out for are the new projects that will be launching in Solana in the next couple of months. Because there's been a lot of interest in these last couple of weeks. I think a lot of people are building and developing on Solana now, and we'll start to see the fruits of their efforts in the next couple of months. So I think that's something I'll definitely be paying attention to.
Yeah, you touched on something there that I kind of want to double click on, and that's in gas fees. Like, I speak to a lot of ETH NFT Fi teams, and like we're gonna sit here and we're gonna chat on real world assets and stuff like that, right? The more I do research, and I am putting out a paper, a report on this right now, where I was just kind of looking at like, how is the NFT Fi explosion going to happen? What is the future of ETH NFTs, and like how is ETH NFT Fi going to kind of combat some of these big time problems? And then you go to talk to real world asset teams that are building, and they have to like mint NFTs on this stuff. And like, unless you're talking about a $50,000 watch and then like the minting price is like $160, then that's fine. But like, I was talking to a team today that somebody minted $25 pair of glasses for $160. Like, that doesn't make sense anymore. And so that, I think, is the major bull case here for Solana, is like compression NFTs. Drip House has done, I don't even know how many NFTs at this point. Like, they've produced millions and millions and millions of NFTs and just do free airdrops for people. And I'm like, that literally couldn't exist on ETH. Like, it couldn't. And so I think as we start to get deeper into the space and see real world assets come on chain and see all of this kind of stuff, the sentiment that I get from people right now is that, oh, well, real world assets need to be on ETH. And I'm like, you're just a boomer. Like, you don't like that. That's the only reason. The only reason you say that is because that is what we have been told for years. Right. And so I think as we start to see compression NFT or compressed NFTs and things like that come on chain, it's going to produce a very interesting conversation for real world assets to start pivoting over to Solana. All I'm going to say, and I'm done.
Yeah, get off your Solana soapbox, you psycho.
I'm not saying.
Well, okay, you definitely have a point about gas fees. Like, we should not be having to pay hundreds of dollars just to like sign a transaction and to submit it. And dude, gas fees hurt even worse when your transaction fails and you still like have to eat the gas. It's crazy. But where I think Solana ultimately actually kind of proves itself as the superior chain, it's like not only like their local fee market, but I think it's the fact that, at least from the research I've done, it's the only blockchain right now that can actually handle a significant amount of transactions per second. Like, I was reading on their Visa partnership, and like even Visa commented being like, I think Visa needs to, at any given point in time, need to be able to transact about 65,000 transactions per second. And they were like, Solana is the only chain that's like capable of doing this right now. And I think that's where it gets really bullish in terms of like technical capacity and capability.
I can't
It's
really speak to that,
interesting
but oh, go ahead.
Let me just chime in because the Solana folks did a good job at Art Basel, and I think it's just interesting to watch some of the culture around NFTs shift there. I think we're going to see a lot more art activity in 2024 on Solana, and it's just one of these things where previously, or up until this point, it's just been PFPs and like degen activity around that. There's all this compressed NFT stuff that you guys have talked about that I think is net new, and that's why it's interesting and drawing people in. Metaplex is kind of the underlay for that, and Drip making it accessible to most people effectively. But yeah, I think there's a lot of artists and art activity as well, like exchange art. I think there's going to be it's going to surprise some people who think that Ethereum has a monopoly on culture in crypto, where you're already starting to see that shift. Like something like Mad Lads is fun to watch, right? Because it's a rallying point for that community. And then it starts to transcend and go, bigger than the Solana world. But yeah, I know a bunch of artists who are like either in process or, have something formally in the books who are like doing stuff on Solana soon. So TBD, we'll see.
Ooh, I think that was a little alpha drop there.
That was massive alpha drop. Like my two questions were, one for Teng about Fire Dancer and what Fire Dancer is going to do for, like, infrastructurally speaking about Solana. I can't speak to that very much. Like I've done research, but I know that is going to increase transactions exponentially. And then my other question for Ben is like, okay, you just dropped like some hot alpha. Like now you need to tell us where to look, because like you can't just like say that and then he's like exchange art, haha. Like I want to hear a little bit more. So those are my two questions.
Okay. I'm probably not the best person to speak on Fire Dancer, but at a very high level, Fire Dancer is going to be a new Solana client. Right now, I think Solana has just one main client right now. And is built by the team by the Jump team, right? And they are basically high frequency traders. They are very good at doing what they do. And they are actually building this to really increase the throughput of Solana as a blockchain. I think it's planned to be released sometime towards the middle part of like next year. And if it does, I think it would increase the scalability of Solana as a chain very significantly. I think that's very important because as much as I'm like super excited about Solana, I think I'm also very cognizant that today I think Solana works very well. Just because I think like crypto hasn't really achieved a lot of like mainstream adoption. But because Solana is also a monolithic chain, basically every application of Solana will have to fight with other applications on Solana as well, in terms of like getting the transactions like included into the blockchain as well. And if we start to get a situation where, we have a couple of like games on Solana, they are seeing like millions of transactions on a very regular basis, I think we're going to see some congestion and problems actually start to emerge. And that's why I think there is that scalability aspect of Solana still needs to be tackled, because if we think some of these use cases for NFTs are going to really go huge and really going to go mainstream, then I think we are still not yet prepared for that kind of future. And, I think today, like some of the gaming teams I talked to, while they're building on Solana, they actually see Solana as maybe sort of like an initial ground for them to build their game on. But at one point when they start to achieve like very large scale, they are thinking about like starting their own blockchain and moving to their own sort of app specific kind of chain as well. So I think that's what I'm seeing.
Interesting.
On more the culture side, I think artists kind of have two modes of like relationship with economic activity, if you will. On the one hand, you have artists that pioneer things, right? And it's like the artists who move into a new neighborhood and they revitalize it and they bring attention and energy there. On the other hand, it's like, okay, when there's something popular, they adapt that into their work and kind of participate in bigger trends. And so you're kind of more pulling on the economic flows, if you will, than contributing to them. And I think initially that's how a lot of stuff starts. Like Solana has grown, right? Obviously we're up whatever amount of X off the bottom, like 8X off the bottom. People have some money. There are going to be some folks like Degen Poet is an interesting example of an artist who's been there for the whole Solana time period, right? So there's going to be people like that who catch some upside and you know, are representative of the culture there. But more than that, I think if you're an artist and you look at all this new money in Solana land, it's kind of like this chain is a little bit de-risked. You see people who, you know, other artists doing activity there. Like, why don't I roll out a collection, or why don't I do something experimental, at least like on the edge over on Solana? And that's how things start, right? And then it gets more validated and other people tell their friends, and then you start to see stuff really rolling out there. And ultimately it lands back on Teng's point earlier, which is to say Solana is just easier to use on so many fronts. Like, I've had so many chats with artists where it's like, man, I don't want to mint something for $50. Like, that's not how I'm going to enter into this, let alone a collection and all that's involved there. Some of the people who, you know, maybe understand provenance or have different ways of thinking about the value of like Ethereum being where their art is, are going to continue to mint on ETH. Most people don't think about this in binary terms, right? It's like, hey, I'm going to also probably explore minting on Solana. And so I think, yeah, to wrap it up, it's mostly like you see a huge inflow of money and attention onto Solana. The secondary effect is artists will start to pull on that and try and do things there, and experimental stuff will show up. People will buy that. Hopefully some things go well. Some artists have breakouts. You see some validation for the actual OG Solana art people. And then it just becomes a secondary domain where artists do stuff on chain.
Dude, that right there, I think, is pure alpha. Because if we talk about Ethereum art, the first time that we really saw art pop off on Ethereum was like when the market was bored, right? And I think we're going to see something similar happen when people make a shit ton of money on Solana and like they don't know where to put their money. And like if you go to exchange art right now, I know that there are OGs that have produced a bunch of pieces. Like I own a Rupture piece that I love. Rupture. Like Rupture's been putting out a bunch of art for years now on Solana, and I bought his second piece and I was like, dude, that's dope. Like I'm going to hold that because I think it's like a timestamp, right? We're talking about Jack Butcher and timestamps, like very similar. But then you have Degen Poet, you have some of these other Soul Scum is another one. Like there's a huge kind of list of artists that we can talk about here. But Ben, I think you nailed that one on the head, brother.
Actually, I have a question for Ben. Like, since you were talking about artists, I know you're like super deep into the art world. Like, do you think the artists like that are going on Solana and releasing collections of Solana, are these like a new breed of artists that are just like getting into the space, or do you see a lot of it like coming from like the OG artists who are like releasing collections on ETH, and then moving and experimenting on like these new chains? Just curious, like your take is.
Yeah, totally good question. I guess I want to say I'm not like the canonical opinion here. I feel like there's going to be a lot of different takes, or maybe people will disagree with what I've said already, but I think it's a mix. I think you see some of the like old school Solana people finally seeing some validation. Like there are teams like Exchange Art that have been building for a couple of years, and now all of a sudden that there's interest, you know, they're there to service that. There's definitely some people who will do art stuff on both ETH and Solana. So folks who have built careers minting stuff on Ethereum and being able to sell into that collector base, I think we'll explore. You know, I know of a few people. I think that list will grow. Who will do things in 2024 on Solana. So yeah, it's kind of a both thing where I think there are original Solana people who are doing stuff there. There's ETH people who are shifting over to some degree or doing both. And then there's net new people too, who are able to come in and say, hey, you know, if you look at Exchange Art and go to that website and think about it super rare in 2018 or 2019 or something, the flow is pretty slick. Like it makes sense. You understand what a digital object is, or an NFT or whatever you want to call it. I can mint, I can do this stuff. It's going to be an onboarding point as well. So all three, I think, are valid here.
I have a question. that kind of came up as you were riffing off of that, Ben. Like, ultimately, for NFTs, I feel like, especially as we move more towards RWAs and, protocols and builders work to abstract the crypto part away from their platforms as much as possible, to the point where some folks don't even really realize they're interacting with crypto, or trying to minimize that realization. Like, when it comes to art, does it matter what chain this all gets minted on? Obviously, I know if it's like ordinals, like that's something completely different. But if we're thinking in like the next 10, 15 years, will people specifically try to seek out like, oh, well, this was an OG piece on the Ethereum blockchain, this was an OG piece on the Solana blockchain? Or will it all kind of just be like, this is really valuable art that's just increased in price? Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah. And to piggyback on that, as Ben answers this, like this was kind of the thing with FX hash, right? I know there's a lot of like big time DAOs and VCs that were buying ETH art, but that did not touch FX hash art, right? And FX hash had like a huge retail thing, and everybody's like, Tezos, we love the art. And now, like, I would be interested to kind of see how that thesis has played out, and if, like, kind of going along with that, right? Like, does provenance exist? Is it blockchain specific, or like, does it matter?
Yeah, all really good questions. I think Ethereum has a premium when it comes to provenance. It's kind of this perfect middle ground of Bitcoin's like security and the expressiveness of a smart contract platform. So when you think about some of the old school art blocks collections, or I don't know, just early generative work, early super rare work, there's a reason why a marginal art buyer would like value that very highly 5 years from now, right? Like, Ethereum is going to be around, it has the history, like there's a lot of validity to that. And a lot of the skepticism around Tezos was pretty valid, or remains pretty valid in my mind. I think there was a lot of artist interest for a season. I'm less plugged in there now. There probably still is, frankly, in part because of it being cheap. And at the time, the narrative around Ethereum having proof of work and Tezos being proof of stake, and so being environmentally clean NFTs, pushed that a little bit. My sense is, I guess, like TLDR, provenance matters. I don't think it's chain specific. I think we'll actually see some interesting stuff on Bitcoin for the same reason, because like there are just people who value culture on these different chains, and people who have money because they've all done very well, that will kind of patron artists in those ecosystems. And so that, I think, is essentially universal. But also, people push value to their work based on who they are, not just like the provenance of the chain that they're working on. You know what I mean? So if I'm an artist today and I start on Solana, and I'm able to tell a really interesting story about myself and my art and build a community around that, people will want to participate in that. In the same way that other people looked at Tezos initially with skepticism and said, like, why not? Let's dig into some of this FX hash stuff or whatever. So yeah, I think like it matters. It matters especially at the high level. Stuff that's like 5 or 6 or 7 figure art is going to have a better time on Ether Bitcoin. But I don't know that anything is fully like. Let me rephrase. I think I am very open about seeing interesting art activity across the stack.
Makes sense. Gosh, I'm going to be entering into my art NFT era in 2024. Just like,
let's go.
I'm ready for it. So pivoting a little bit, I think something that's been really exciting, and we've mentioned it a few times already, has been seeing RWAs on chain, specifically things like, trading cards via Pokemon cards that we're seeing from like Courtyard. And I know Colony's tackling that. And there's also like 4K, but we're also starting to see like luxury goods come on chain. And obviously there's like financial activity around that. It's still incredibly early, in my opinion, in this space, but how are you guys feeling about it so far? Like, have you had conversations with your friends outside of the space around RWAs? Like, does it click for them? Or is it something that it's like, maybe in about a year, once more traction picks up, it'll be something I pay more attention to? Like, where are you guys in terms of what your thinking is?
Yeah, I think like at least in my own sort of like personal conversations like with friends, I think there is a lot of like hesitation. Like I know a couple of friends who are really into like watches, and they wouldn't put it on chain, and the reason is because there is still that centralization risk. Right? You have to send it to someone to vault it and tokenize it, and you have to trust that provider actually does what he does. So I think from a mainstream perspective, there is still a little bit of that mental barrier and mindset to overcome. But for me personally, I do think like RWAs, especially for collectibles, like this is going to be one of these sectors like within this whole possible realm of asset classes that's going to come on chain faster, like maybe even faster than some of the more traditional like financial instruments like debt, equity, and so on. And I think the reason is because that the financial system for collectibles like rare sneakers, luxury watches, and stuff today is very underdeveloped, right? If I want to, if let's say I have $100,000 like Pokemon card collection, I can't go to a bank and say, hey, can you give me a loan for this collection? I have to go to maybe a pawn shop and he's going to cut me quite tight. He's going to take like 20% fees and stuff for all of that, right? So I think we're going to see one of that really driving the use of like collectibles like to come on chain. I also think there's also going to be, there is quite a bit of demand like for people who want to like trade some of these collectibles, but don't actually want to perhaps own the physical version of this. And when you have it tokenized and have it come on chain, you can actually trade these things around without actually having to deal with like the physical item itself.
Like storing it somewhere in your house.
Exactly,
Totally.
right? Like maybe I think this Pokemon card is going to be very valuable in the future, but I don't want to keep it and have the risk of like maybe spilling water on it and it just like disappearing. And I feel like there is going to be the appetite for these like sort of alternative assets to be traded. Yeah, so I'm pretty bullish on it, to be honest.
Let's fucking go.
I agree with that, dude. Like, and I think what you said there about that happening slowly at first and then all at once is spot on. Like I had a conversation today with one of those companies that's in the RWA space and doing storage and insurance and stuff like that. And they were like, basically TLDR on that would be infrastructure isn't quite there yet. We need to onboard more people. How do we onboard more people and convince them that paying the $160 gas fee is worth it? And that's it going to be like a main problem, right? Like if somebody has a $300 Charizard card that they think number go up in a year, like they're not going to pay $160 on that, right? So I think that is a headache. And then on top of that, like being able to trade that thing, it becomes interesting. But how do they get instant liquidity for that? And I think that will be another one, because like basically how it works right now is like somebody sends this in, they appraise it, and like there's an appraisal value there. And then they take the NFT and they're like, okay, with the appraisal value, I'm going to now put that on a peer-to-peer lending marketplace, right? I'm going to go to NiftyFi. I'm going to go to Arcade. I'm going to go to Kettle. I'm going to go to one of these places. And then I'm going to have to approve the transaction there. And then I'm going to have to go through that whole mumbo jumbo. And then somebody's going to offer me liquidity, right? Now that works for luxury goods, right? If we're talking 50 grand, 100 grand, 300 grand, whatever, the Supreme thing that went down with 4K, like those are big time deals, right? So then it doesn't necessarily matter. Or if we're talking about wine or whatever is going to come on chain.
But Dalton, I feel like for the trading cards, it's different because we're already seeing those like models emerge, right? Like I think this is why like Courtyard and Colony are building on Polygon. Granted,
Polygon, that's right.
Yeah, granted, like Polygon itself as a chain and interacting on the chain can be kind of confusing. Like you connect your wallet and you're all of a sudden connected to their ZK rollup instead of like Polygon mainnet and like little things like that. But like from what I've seen, like Courtyard's going to be, or Courtyard, it's like mail for free, vault for free at Brinks. They have like a legacy name. The Colony team, I think, is working on something really interesting in terms of like instant liquidity, though, when it comes to trading this stuff. And I think we'll start to see that emerge in like Q1 of next year.
That'll be cool to see NFT. And this is something that I think we need to see, that 2020, that's this year. 2023, we saw an explosion of NFT lending, right? Like peer-to-peer, peer-to-pool, like all these different models that came out, and like all of that was cool. All of that happened on ETH mainnet. Like Solana NFT lending, cool, it's doing its thing. And like that's mainly peer-to-peer with like predetermined terms by the marketplace, Sharkify. Like that's all that is really happening there at this point. Citrus has a little bit that's peer-to-peer as well. But it'll be interesting if RWAs are the catalyst for some of these like OG NFT lending platforms to say, okay, now we're going to offer support for Polygon because like
Yeah.
we need, and like we haven't had that push yet.
But also, I think you have to like, I don't really see anyone taking a loan out on like a card that's worth $500. I think they're going to be bundles of cards that have to at least be like $10,000, $15,000. Because it's like, what the fuck are you doing taking a loan, a $200 loan against like a card that's maybe only worth like $500 or $600? It's kind of wild to me. But speaking of NFT lending and NFT Fi, wanted to take a little bit of time to just look at what's happening in the space because it's been a crazy year. So this is the map of all the builders. And I think this is all ETH that was just recently put together. Like the amount of borrowing and lending protocols that have come on chain is insane. I think lending volumes right now, let's see here. I think we're sitting at like 3.8 billion in cumulative like borrow volume since NFT Fi launched in, I think that was 2021 with Nifty Fi. It's interesting because you're going to notice something about this chart. It's like, okay, a few colors here, and then all of a sudden this bright green comes out and just starts dominating it. And surprise, surprise, it is Blend. We need to talk a little bit about Blend entering into the NFT Fi scene. One, so cool to see so much borrow volume done on, peer-to-peer loans. But I think there were a lot of consequences and fallouts that fell onto some of these NFT collections. Like the Zuki death spiral from Blend is very notable and burned into my brain because that was like kind of traumatizing to experience as a Garden member. But Teng, Ben, what stood out to you guys in those moments? Did you kind of like see this crash was going to come from the time like Blend launched? Because they didn't really launch with a whole lot. They were just like, and lending's now enabled and you guys get points for it. Like go crazy.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think when it first launched, I was very excited about it. But then, we think about like what people are using these loans for. And the good thing about Blend is that because of the incentives, you can actually take out a loan at a very high loan value and at very low interest rates. And what that does is that it really encourages people to leverage up, right? And you start to buy more with your NFTs, and then you take out a loan and you buy even more NFTs and stuff. And that's what leads to volatility in prices, right? So we've seen some of these NFT projects like, people will take out a lot of loans and then prices can go up a lot. And then basically when prices drop, people quickly sell. They might lose some money and then it goes down a little bit as well. So I think it's created some of this volatility. But I think overall it's a good thing, right? I think it unlocks like greater capital efficiency. Like people can finally take value from the NFTs and maybe use that capital to do something else. So yeah, I think it's interesting. I do have some reservations about the interest rate mechanism on Blend because for a retail user, and I'm saying this because I've been bitten by it myself, is that because the interest rates, if you don't monitor it, it can actually go up very high. Because
this is through the auto refinance.
Correct, the auto refinancing thing. Yeah, you might end up with like a very high interest rate that if you just refinance it a little bit, it will drop a lot. So I feel like it's probably not the most retail friendly mechanism, but I think we're all just experimenting in the space. That's my take.
Ben, what's your Blend Blur take?
Yeah, it's a big conversation, right? I think lending is like one of the few verticals that has some product market fit in NFT finance. There's a lot of interest. Some of the peer-to-peer teams have been around for a long time. I think Blend fits vaguely in the sort of more peer-to-pool category where you're just able to get liquidity faster. And so it ends up being a tool for leverage, right? As a lot of those initial collections came out, speaking of the Milady kind of financialization of Milady's thing, like they were early in that process. DGods, it was the same chart pattern. Actually, I think Dalton, we talked about this earlier in the year, and seeing people lever up to try and get some points and then get washed out. It's effectively the same pattern every time. So yeah, it's like very bullish that people are thoughtfully trying to create different ways to facilitate lending. I think in Blur's case, it's probably also trying to explore what a perps product could look like on top of something like that. yeah, I mean, Blur itself and like the entirety of that organization and what it's trying to do is probably a longer rabbit trail. So I'll stop there. But I think, yeah, cautiously optimistic on good teams building good tech in a proven vertical.
So this is like pretty related to this. And this was actually a question that came in from Dude Lifts. Do you guys foresee a super NFT finance app emerging? Is it Blend/Blur/Blast/ whatever next BL name that Pac-Man comes up with?
Blam!
Oh man, Teng, you want to go first?
Yeah. I guess like some thoughts about this. Like, I feel like it's very in trend right now to want to build a super app. Like everybody wants to get that. It feels like, that's something you can get a very high valuation. You get a lot of people on board. But I feel like the way you get to becoming a super app is you have to start from a niche, and you have to own that niche, and you have to have a lot of users. And I think the products and apps and platforms and teams that can potentially become like a super app are those that are able to already have a large number of users on board. And what they do is that with this like large number of users using their very specific product, they start to expand to other verticals and other niches, and eventually they become some kind of super app that basically dominates all the different verticals, because there's a lot of synergies between like the users on one vertical versus another as well. I think Blur seems to be wanting to do that. They do seem like they have both the ambition and I guess like early product market fit in order to sort of like get to that. So I think like among the teams in the NFT space right now, potentially they could get there. I also do think that we are in such early days like in the NFT space. If you look at the number of users, number of people who are actually buying and trading NFTs, or even the number of people who are, say, using like NFT finance products, I think I last checked, it's probably like maybe 10 to 12,000 users so far in total. It's still very small, and that what it means is that it's still very wide open for someone to come in and be able to capture all of the users and mind share in the future. So pretty much keeping an open mind on this.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in and say Blur is going to become a super app, but I don't know if it's going to become the super app. Like if you just look at how most of crypto works, there are multiple places where people trade perps. Like there's multiple places where you can get loans. It's not super monolithic. Of course, if you are the Blur team, that's the outcome that you want to engineer for yourself, because you want to, be able to capitalize on all the trading fees and all the perps and all the lending, all under one umbrella. And I don't know, maybe to zoom out even further, I remember reading a thing, I think it was Dan Elitzer wrote in DeFi Summer. So this is like 2020. And his comment was, if I'm remembering correctly, was like Uniswap, which is a decentralized exchange, and Compound, which is a money market, would end up competing with each other to become prime brokerages, or basically super apps for like finance teams, right? Where you could go to one brand and get all sorts of services. And so it's just interesting to see that didn't happen. Like those teams sort of stayed in their lanes, but here we are with Blur actually maybe being the first ever like attempt at becoming a super app with multiple services, something that's at least not like a formal centralized exchange, right? Something like Coinbase is a super app already, right? But if you think about Blur as, okay, well, it's an exchange, and with Blend they have lending, and with Blast they're going to have a full like environment where they can facilitate all of these different things. That's definitely, it seems like anyway, from an outsider perspective, the play they're gunning for. I'm just not convinced that is somehow like going to clear the field. Like you can still make an incredibly interesting perps experience independent of that, and people will show up, right? It's just, there are different ways to play the game.
Totally.
I am interested in this. We're talking about Blur, then we're talking about Blast and kind of everything they've created to this point. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but as for Blast, creating an L2 and seeing kind of this mercenary tactic that they've taken on the market, right? Like literally it's like the Spider-Man meme where everybody's just like, like everybody's like super tense and like, no, I'm going to take your liquidity. PvP, we're seeing it all over the place, right? And it worked for Blur. Like they came in, they said like, dude, we're going to take all the liquidity. And if you use OpenSea, you're not going to get rewarded. And this is that. And now OpenSea still does volume, not the volume that Blur does, but also incentivized volume is a thing, right? But do you think that this is going to happen when they do create Blast? So 411 on this, Blast at this point is a multi-sig, right? A multi-sig with $800 million in it. and they don't even have an L2 yet, but they're building the L2, and the L2 will eventually get here. And we're trusting the fact that Blur has built multiple things. Like we trust them to a point, right? Do you think that this absolutely destroys the ETH L2 ecosystem if Blast comes in and says, you know what, like, if you bridge to Arbitrum, if you bridge to Optimism, if you bridge to any of these other chains, you're not going to get any of these Blast tokens? And what does that mean for the ETH ecosystem? Because like my personal take on this is that it's going backwards, right? Like we're making the ecosystem more immature because we can't progress, right? Like they don't have this open source mindset. They're like, no, fuck you guys. We're going to win. We're going to be the super app, and we're going to kind of take charge in this. Don't go to Arbitrum or Optimism. And that's that. So how do you guys kind of feel about that?
It's it's a very big conversation that I think is happening right now, and it's probably one of the things that makes me feel that there is still a lot to be figured out within the ETH ecosystem, because like, you know, exactly what you said, like over the last like 6 months, we've seen so many of these like new L2s and roll-ups like come to market. And you know, next year is going to be a lot more. Partly is because of valuations, and people can see that, hey, if I spin on an L2, I can immediately get like 10 figures of like valuation, you know, pretty easily versus building a consumer app, and that's why these things are coming market. But what it also means is that I think it does two things. One is that it means that there's a very heavy competition among L2s. Everyone's going to fight for the same user today. They're going to do it through incentives, grants, and whatever. And the one that can execute best on this and bring the most talented developers are going to win on this. But I think one thing that worries me also is that it does fragment the liquidity a lot, right? So basically you have like people who have to split their funds among all these different chains, and it's not as easy right now to bridge funds. You know, it does take effort, it does take cash as well to kind of like do all of that. And that makes it a very complex path for both like developers in terms of thinking like, if I want to build a product, which L2 should I build on? Which one is most interesting for me? And also as a user, like where should I be putting my capital in? So I feel like these are some complexities that we haven't yet sort of figured out. And maybe that's also a reason why Solana is interesting, because it's a lot simpler. Like, you know, there's just one like ecosystem, and you don't have to think about like which L2 is going to be the one that wins.
100% agree with that.
Yeah, it's a good take, man. I don't know that I have too much to add. I think when I think about Blast, I think about it like mercenary is a word that a lot of people have used, but it's also just sort of peeling back the curtains and saying like, this is how crypto incentives can work. We're going to push this out to the nth degree and see if we can win, right? It's just like full on the violence of startups, where you're just sort of calling people's assumptions and saying, well, what if we did this? Like if you were going to start an L2 and try and compete with everybody, that's the way that you would do that. And so it's just interesting to wrestle with like, to what extent does this team have ambition? Like, what are they really trying to accomplish here? Because are they going to also fork Lido and just be like, cool, we're going to run our whole thing there? Like it's interesting, but you know, yeah, the way I look at them is highly competent team, you know, clearly Ponzi engineers, like to the nth degree, like they're very effective at that. They have a core like flywheel in that people use Blur, like the actual the core product. So there's still a lot of interest, and they are, you know, the team to watch ultimately in the space. Like everyone else is taking their cues off of them, but I do think at a point people like there still are alternate approaches to building any of the products that they offer for NFT Finance, but also L2s, right? You know, I have some friends who work at these different L2s, and of course they're you know, thinking about this in terms of competition, but it's also like, dude, we've been thinking about this for 5 years, right? It's like, we're not scared. Sorry. Right. Like we're ready to go to the mat. And so I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm always pro competition, and I think it'll be a funny shitcoin season whenever that chain launches. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Well, so speaking of competition, like not only are we seeing this on the ecosystem side, but we're also seeing it in just like the lending side. Like Dalton and I joke about this all the time. It's like, dude, what is going on with the NFT-fi lending wars? Like it's gone so PvP. Like if you're a peer-to-peer platform, we are seeing vampirism attacks on other peer-to-peer platforms. We're I used to work for a platform where we did a vampirism attack on the only other peer-to-pool platform that was available. And so it's one of those things that it's like, in retrospect for me, it's like, well, we did what we thought was necessary to try to like get more users, to get, more unique wallet addresses. And we knew our app was stickier. So once we converted, it was just like one of the easiest lifts. But ultimately, like, is this net negative on the space? Is the pie too small, right? Is the pie too small right now to be fighting over?
Yeah, I mean,
Ting's
I can
like
jump in. I think
formulating his thoughts.
it's hard.
Go
It's hard.
first, Ben.
Yeah.
I'll riff a little bit. I mean, there's some of the original P2P, marketplaces, some of the original peer-to-pool marketplaces. You have people who are building stuff that's kind of like in between. I mean, something like, if you have Niftify, that is the first example of this peer-to-peer concept, and then you have like BenDAO or something as like an early peer-to-pool concept. You have people iterating on those two underlying concepts. So something like MetaStreet comes along and it's just building a different version of peer-to-pool that people seem to like. And, there's a lot of innovation around even something like Arcade or whatever. Like there are different people in the P2P space too. But it really, when you zoom out at the end of the day, there's only so many people who are going to take out loans against NFTs. Right. And so it does become a bit of a war, everyone's points and tokens and essentially like, how do I Ponzify this entire exercise so that I can win market share? And that works well when you're growing as like a segment, but it seems like either stagnant or slightly growing now. And so it ends up feeling very combative in my mind where, a lot of these things are zero sum, and it's tough because I mean, like we know most of the teams, right? It's a small industry. I hung out with a lot of them in Miami at our Basel. There's a lot of good people building interesting stuff. But I feel like the way I try and think about it is more positive sum, which is to say like this whole category should grow massively if what we believe is true. And so there's probably a lane for multiple players, and that's at least the hope. Though for sure, I mean, if you're honest with yourself, like these things are competing against each other without question.
Yeah.
Well, and it's even like, look at this. This is volume by platform type. It's like it was all peer-to-peer, and then what is this, like 2022 we see peer-to-pool start to come out, and then like Blend just comes and crushes all of the peer-to-pool protocols. Like peer-to-pool doesn't even feel like it's on the map right now. Like Ben, I think you did a good job. You called out BenDAO, MetaStreet. I know there's Cyan, but like which one of these models is going to win? I don't know, because I think they're all so different and have such different feature sets. But Teng, we're gonna put you back in the hot seat.
I think just like general thoughts on like peer-to-pool. You're right. I think it looks like most people are pursuing the sort of like peer-to-peer model, and it makes sense today because like if you look at like these peer-to-pool protocols, they actually have a lot more additional risk like compared to like the peer-to-peer protocols. You have things like you have to make sure that you have to trust that the mechanism of the protocol is designed in a way that is robust. And during periods of like volatility, or let's say we have a black swan event where NFT prices like drop 40-50% in a day, the protocol is not going to incur a lot of like bad debt. And we've seen a lot of these cases happen with the typical stuff like DeFi protocols outside of NFTs, right? So we know that these are situations that can happen. And I think on the peer-to-pool protocol, there is also the possibility for you as a user to kind of like be liquidated, and people don't like that feeling. So I feel like there is a little bit of a UX issue with the peer-to-pool protocols, where one is that you have to be a little bit more careful, and you can never have that full like safety or certainty as compared to the peer-to-peer lending protocols, where you're only dealing with a single other party. And I think the other thing is that because of these additional risks, like a lot of these peer-to-pool protocols have to have a lower like LTV values in order to be a little bit more conservative. And degens being degens, they want to really max out the value of the loan they can take out the NFT. And basically right now is the peer-to-peer protocols like Blend that actually offer you the highest like LTV at the lowest interest rates.
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%, dude. Like I think the peer-to-pool mechanism is going to slowly disappear unless Like Meta Street, I think is really interesting. Like that's a really cool one to me. But outside of that, like I don't really see a future. I do have one last question before we wrap up. Going back to this ETH L2 kind of ecosystem landscape that we see at this point, I'm wondering if Base is going to be a safe haven for the ETH L2 ecosystem. I think that eventually Blast goes and like guns up at everybody. And I don't think that that's going to be a very fun experience for Arbitrum and Optimism and stuff like that. But I'm wondering if like the GameFi, SocialFi scene on Base that we're starting to see explode is so retail oriented that like if we do see an onslaught of retail, are they going to just absolutely what Base is prime for that, right? Coinbase is the debt or the centralized exchange for normies. They've done a really good job of positioning themselves. They have a lot of good publicity. They're very good at marketing. This recent marketing campaign was fucking epic. Like, I'm wondering if like the GameFi, SocialFi ecosystem is going to kind of just trend towards Base, and if they're the safe haven.
Okay, I just some quick thoughts. Like, it's something that my colleagues and I actually have been discussing a fair bit in like these last couple of weeks. And I think what the general consensus is that if you look at the different L1s and L2s that are out there, at the end of the day, I think they are not going to be competing very much on the technology, which one can actually do better. A lot of the competition and the ones that are going to emerge as the winners are the ones with the best distribution. And I think Base has that for it, right? Because it has that very strong linkage with Coinbase. I think Coinbase is going to push a lot of its like hundreds of millions of users to be using like Base as a platform for its product. So, that already has something for it versus say some of the other alternatives like say Aptos and Sui that doesn't have that inherent ecosystem and they have to actually build and find users organically and from the ground up, which makes it a much longer and more difficult path for them. So, I mean, overall, I guess like in short, I'm pretty bullish on like what's going to happen on Base. And I personally want to keep a very close eye on projects, NFTs that are actually launching on Base.
Red Pet, let's go, baby.
Yo, I'm going to take credit for turning you on to Fred Pet.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I will not claim that at all. But hey, I stuck around. I kept buying, and now we're up only, bro.
Let's go.
I'm done.
I think the one thing I would just double like underline from what Teng said is the word distribution. I think that's kind of the big differentiator for Base. Coinbase has 100 million users. People talk about this all the time. Like if there's going to be an onboarding portal essentially to being on chain, there's automatically sort of a level of legitimacy with Base that other L2s don't necessarily have because their brands are newer, right? Coinbase has been around for a long time. And so I think we'll probably see a lot of activity there. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see in terms of NFT finance, like what exactly plays out there. Because in so many ways, it really just depends on where does the underlying culture activity happen. Because then that's going to be where NFT finance also happens, right? You can't really just have like a lending market up there when there's no NFTs that are that consequential yet. So we'll see. But I think that's more of like a independent of NFT finance, probably just a general take. That I think Base will do very well when Ethereum land continues to, be in the spotlight.
So obviously we've thrown out a lot of thoughts, a lot of takes, a lot of alpha on, specific lending platforms, specific marketplaces, collections, etc. Zooming out in general, 2024 and beyond, what do you guys see? Like if you could have 3 top predictions that you want to see unfold over the next year and maybe a little bit beyond that, what would they be?
Maybe I can just throw out some quick thoughts. I think one is that we could see some of these like NFT character brands, like Pudgies or Doodles, really start to surprise everyone and either go viral or sort of break out. Because I still know a lot of people who basically think like NFTs are just like JPEGs, they're just pictures, there's zero value to any of these things. But I think they don't really see that, there actually are teams behind this that actually are trying to build IP, they're actually trying to build a business, and they're kind of like writing them off a little bit early. And I feel like, already we're seeing the early maybe glimpse of this like with Pudgies, like starting to get a lot of attention. I feel like some of these brands are going to sort of like break out next year. So maybe there's one. Yeah, I think Solana catching up to ETH in terms of like NFT volumes and all of that, or at least narrowing the gap a little bit. Yeah, I can see Delta, you're really into this too. Yeah, I think that's definitely also going to be one thing. And maybe one more I'll just throw out is that I think a lot of people are going to be trying some of these like newer NFT token standards, like the ERC 6551s and stuff. Because the more I look into these things, I feel like it really gives NFTs like superpowers. It gives them the ability to do new things. Like with 6551, like your NFT can actually have its own wallet, and what that means, it can do anything on the blockchain that you can do yourself as well, which opens up a lot of very creative use cases. And I think like NFTs existing as just like static pictures are probably going to be a thing of the past like soon.
6551 is one to watch. That's definitely interesting. I'll share my 3. 1, I think NFT perps, or the NFT perp volume flips spot volume. I think Solana flips ETH on all main metrics, maybe besides market cap, but I wouldn't even be surprised if it did, just because from like usability, I think it's better. So I think that there's going to be like a hardcore Solana season. Last one, between ordinals and NFT AMM volume, I think NFT AMM volume continues to grow. As I don't know if we're quite there yet, but 20% of NFT volume on Solana is NFT AMM. On ETH, that's not happening. So I think that we might see 50-50 in 2024. Ooh. And then the ordinals ecosystem, I think, is massively undervalued still to this point. Like, I think that we're going to see some ridiculous fucking numbers. So there you
Pump
go.
Pump the bags.
I don't own anything yet. But I will be going in soon.
Ben,
Excellent.
your 3?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a pro Solana point. I'm more on the arts and culture side, I guess, and I've already explored that a bit. But I just think what happens in terms of art and culture on Solana in 2024 will surprise people. People have up to this point thought of Solana as like a particular kind of chain, but I think there will be more art activity there than people expect. I think Parallel will explode and be the first major game that actually gets quote unquote mainstream adoption, which is interesting because I just think, yeah, on multiple fronts, like the trading card game is already aligned super well for an existing audience of trading card game players, but also this AI agent game that they're building called Colony. I think that this idea of, you have a passive person that you're playing a game with is sort of like the Candy Crush for millennials and Zoomers. It's like this passive gaming state that I think they will pioneer an entire category around that stuff. It's one of the few teams that really just actually knows how to execute and can go fast. And so I think Parallel will be a massive breakout ecosystem. I have no idea what happens to, price. I would assume NGU number goes along with that. But I just think it's cool. Like, it's fun that I actually have something to shill to my friends to be like, yo, play this, and it actually holds up, right? Versus some of the janky stuff that we've seen in crypto land. I guess the final third one is I think we'll see a mobile app explode. That also people weren't expecting. Something like a gallery for collecting, and being able to talk about and add extra social context to NFTs, and that whole side of things could happen. Floor is another example. Just something that is adjacent to crypto that is specifically mobile will explode. And I feel like I'm waiting to see what that one is.
Let's go. My 3 are a little bit different. I think we're going to see an explosion of supply for luxury goods and collectibles coming on chain as NFTs. And then building on top of that, like, not only do I think the NFT lending volume is going to go up significantly, but I think we're going to see a lot of really cool use cases, particularly around games, built on top of the card collections that are coming on chain. Like the fact that, you now have all of thousands and thousands of Pokemon cards tokenized and vaulted. Like, I can see people just building actual degen card games where you're betting actual cards that are like locked up. And I can see that getting a lot of like mainstream traction. And then the third is I think Taylor Swift will be entering Web3 in some capacity. So keep
She
rolling your
I
eyes.
knew
I
it
will
was gonna
be
happen. I was like, dude,
insufferable.
I literally was sitting here. I was like, she's gonna bring up Taylor Swift. I know it.
Fuck yeah, I
know it.
am.
Hey, I'm in the Taylor chat, so I'm
Bro,
with her.
I knew it was. God damn. I was like taking
There-
side bets with myself.
No, I think the music and Web3 is something that I just feel like I haven't seen talked about a lot, but I think there's going to be something that gets built on an infrastructure level, whether that's ticketing or a way to like connect with your top super fans that is going to come out. And I totally see like Taylor and her camp spearheading that.
Yeah,
Just-
some socialify something with like
Musicify, yeah.
integrating influencers, celebrities. Like Friend Tech was very interesting, and we didn't
Taylor
even get to
Swift
touch
would have
on it.
never
But
gone
like,
on Friend Tech.
but like that showed that there was product market fit for us. Like, dude, Crypto Cobain, his fucking keys went to like 10 ETH. Like just to chat with him, right? But like, if I see where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Pro Taylor Swift entering Web3.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I asked for. And Ben, Teng, thank you guys for your time. I know we ran a little over and we had some technical difficulties getting started, but it really means a lot that you would take like basically 2 hours out of your day just to sit here and riff with us on
Yeah, guys.
these crazy things.
Thank you. That was super sick. Just getting to hear y'all's takes, and dude, Ben with the art and culture stuff. Tang, you just know the space so well. Like it was a pleasure.
I mean, thanks for having me here. I mean, it was really fun. Like, it's not often that you get to have these like very in-depth like conversations about NFTs with people, and really appreciate like this so much. So I had a great time.
Cool.
Yeah,
Can
likewise,
actually do
guys.
that
Thanks
too.
so much. This has been so fun.
Let's go. All right, guys, you know the drill. We'll be back. Actually, are we filming next week, Dalton? I don't know.
Maybe IRL.
We might be filming an IRL episode next week. So make sure to tune in and be sure to follow Tang and Ben, and we'll catch you guys later. Thanks.
See you guys.